Great to have this opportunity to share together. So thank you very much. Well, we've all been experiencing the biggest change that this country has seen since the Second World War. And it has touched everything in so many different ways, including the rhythm and the life of church and how we do things. It's been turned upside down. But it's probably important to think about what change does. And change is not just a negative thing, it has a positive aspects as well. And I want to look at four changes that COVID has had and its impact has had on us. And the first is a very positive one, that psychologists and missiologists and people who think about these things know that change produces spiritual openness. And we have seen in the big missional world out there that when change happens on a national level, as it happened in Cambodia with Pol Pot and all the refugees went into Thailand, suddenly there was a spiritual openness. Many of us know in our own lives, certainly I do, that when I left England and went to Australia, that change created spiritual openness. And I began to meet Christians and had a whole new perception of things, which led me on a pathway to faith. And one of the things that we've been praying in hope is out of Colossians chapter 4, that God would open a door for the word. Now, we never expected it to happen in this way. And I'm not saying that God is in any way behind COVID, but there is an opportunity here for the word. There is a new spiritual openness. Secondly, there is a new connectedness. One of the things that we have all found as Christians, that suddenly we are involved in this phenomena of people getting to know their neighbors in a way that they have never done before. That as the hedonism has sort of drained away, the underlying Christian worldview and a high view of people and neighbor has emerged. This was really expressed well by the Queen, who said, "Our streets are empty, but they are filled with love." And suddenly there is this new connectedness. I live in a cul-de-sac, and I knew most people in the cul-de-sac, but with our WhatsApp, with our clapping for the NHS, with all sorts of other activities, just acts of kindness, knocking on the door, people giving you presents, neighbors ringing up and doing shopping for you, suddenly we are connected in a whole new way. So those are two positive changes. But the third change is a bit more difficult, that the life of church has been touched, and we have relied on the centrality of our church meetings and our buildings. And we particularly relied on this when it comes to people's journey to faith. That I might have conversations with people, but then I might invite them to a guest service or an event that is based in the church. There is some drawing to that building, and what the influence of that building has been a very important part of the pathway to faith that many people have historically had. But now, at least for the time being, that pathway is not available and it is lost. And so we've gone from the central to the personal. Suddenly we realize that every lay person should have always been the front line of mission, but now they are the front line of mission, whether we like it or not. That it is the relationship of Christian individuals out there, and it is their witness, their connectedness. And now we have to encourage and empower these church members, our lay people, on how they can create pathways. So there's a new openness, there are more connections, but we have gone from central to personal. And the fourth point is, as I've already said, the normal pathways are really not there. So let's think about a pathway and what a pathway might look like and how it might have historically worked and how it might work through the lockdown. So Ben, if you could put up my first slide, that might be helpful. So we all know verse John 3:16, God so loved the world that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. If we could go on to the second part, Ben. So I have drawn out of this verse three thoughts. God so loved the world that he sent his son. That is an encounter. And what happens through relationships is encounter. And as we are more connected, we are encountering our church, our friends out there, people who have no faith or on a journey to faith. And we've been encountering them in three ways during the lockdown. Two that was expected, and one that was a surprise. As I've already said, the level of personal connectedness and friendship and relationships has gone up all around the country. Secondly, the level of serving. Christians have been amongst those, if not at the forefront of those, who have reached out through food banks, through volunteering, and we have in greater numbers stepped into our communities to care, to love, to do what we can do. And that is perfectly right and proper. So those are two areas that we have been very involved in, where people are encountering us. And the third is a bit of a surprise, that suddenly, as we put our church services up on Zoom, or we broadcast them over Facebook and all sorts of other ways, we have found that on a Sunday morning, churches are experiencing hundreds, if not thousands of people are now watching church on a Sunday. We don't know who these people are. They could be your neighbor. They could be anywhere around the country, but from all over your community. And suddenly they are connecting with us. And yet we don't know them. And we've got to find a way that we could help them on a journey to faith without a Sunday service that we would normally have in a building so we could shake their hand and talk to them. Now they're just a connection out there in the ether, and we've got to see how we could build it. So the first level is encounter. But the second level is, if we can go on to the next part of that, engage. So encounter is really fundamental. But often our encounter is quite light in its content. You know, it's a conversation. It's a hello, Laurence, how are you? It's a building of a relationship. But it is in many ways quite light. And historically, to make that relationship deeper, I might have invited people to something that the church was doing. Maybe I was aiming to invite them to the carol service, or maybe I was aiming to invite them to the Easter service. I would have had a little strategy in my head that if my neighbor or friend seemed enthusiastic or responsive, once they'd found out I was a Christian, here was my opportunity to take them on a journey. But now that is not possible to do. So I've got to think, how can I engage them deeper? What could we do that would enhance the relationship that we've had in WhatsApp through all of these different ways? And we've been serving people, and we've been thinking, wow, we have these relationships with them. How could we make that a little bit deeper? We've also been having all these people come and watch us on television. What could we do? Well, there are two things that I think we can do that would help engage work much better. And the first is that we need to empower people in conversation, that we need to give confidence to church members, not just to engage in a light conversation, but perhaps by what I call playing conversational tennis, they could lob a thought. Have you found prayer helpful during this time of difficulty? And put a spiritual dynamic into the conversation. And we need to encourage Christians to have the confidence just to throw the tennis ball over the net and see if our neighbor or our friend or the person we're serving might knock the ball back to us, as it were, and then we can engage in a conversation. But obviously, if they stop asking questions, we stop talking. So we want to enhance conversation. But another important area that we want to enhance is how can we give things to people? And so Hope have been working on a strategy for many years to develop product that we would not be ashamed of, high quality product that we could give to people. And obviously we didn't design it for the situation we're in now, but suddenly as this situation emerges, we find that we have these fantastic resources that God has led us into that can now be given to church members. So if we can have the next slide, Ben. Not embrace, we'll come back to that. Let's do this one, thank you. So here are 4 resources that Hope has been able to develop, and we can make these available to our friends, our relationships. And when people are on the internet, at the end of our church services, we can say to people, if you send us an email, which is an important link point, we would love to send you free one of these resources, because these people are hidden away on the ether in some way. We want to draw them in so that we have a name, maybe an address, but definitely an email. And we will get the address if we send them one of these. So let me go through these 3 missional resources here. First is an amazing Gospel of Mark, which is fully graphic. There's a picture on every page. It is done in a really dramatic way. It is a fantastic resource. And as all of Hope's resources, it's available at a price that churches can afford to buy a couple of hundred. They're about £1 each. You get them, you have this resource, you can give them to church members can give them to their friends. Through conversation, I could say to somebody, by the way, over this time, have you read the Bible? Here is a fantastic copy of Mark. Can I give it to you? One person just put them at the end of her drive and said on her WhatsApp group, if you'd like a Gospel of Mark, feel free to take one, and people did. The second resource here is Who Do You Say I Am? This is the story of Jesus, his historicity. What did he say? Do historians and professors believe that he is a real historical person? And the answer is they do, many of them, and they have said so. And we realize that part of the difficulty in mission today is 40% of our nation aren't quite sure who Jesus is. So we've got to step into that space and take Jesus. Many people say he's the best kept secret of the gospel. We want to put Jesus out there so that people can see the wonder of his words, the wonder of his life, and fall in love with him. And so Who Do You Say I Am, which is available through the Hope Rees website, again, at a very economical price, can be made available. But this third resource is even more extraordinary. Sometimes people write things. So Rachel and a team of others kind of created this resource before COVID, but it is about hope in difficult times. It's about hope through loss. It's about what do you do when your world has been turned upside down. And so for many unchurched people out there, not only are their lives turned upside down, but they're encountering pain and difficulties. And so this high quality resource could be given to an individual that would really help them. And then let's go back to my other thing and go on to embrace, Ben, thank you. So if we think that our strategy has 3 elements, 1, encounter, which we don't have to think about, that is happening. But the real challenge is engage. What is the next step? It can't be as it was in days gone by, inviting them to the church. So we've got to think of new ways to give confidence to church members, how they can share their story through words. We've got to use resources like the 3 that I have suggested to you that can be taken out there and given to people. We need to make a connection at the end of our Sunday, for all those people who are watching on the internet, we need to talk to them and say, if this Sunday has been a help to you, please send us your email and address, and we would love to send you one of these resources. We need to have a strategy, create a pathway that an individual can use, that a church can use. And lastly, of course, we need to think about how they can embrace faith for themselves. And again, this has got more complex. In the old days, we could invite people to Alpha or something very similar in our local church, or you had a guest service where someone was going to speak and you could invite them to that, and there would be an opportunity for them to respond and to find faith. But neither of those things exist at the moment and won't exist for a while. But Alpha has very wisely migrated onto the internet, and it can be done either through HTB or you can do it locally. And so there are ways that we can put Alpha back into action. And some people are finding that the kind of Zoom area has helped people. They don't feel kind of so embarrassed. They can kind of step into the Alpha experience, but actually they're not physically there. And it seems that the results are really quite positive. The other thing that we might begin to think about is I did some unofficial research a few years ago that showed me that 30% of people who come to faith on their own. Just them. They talk, they pray, they come to faith. And we won't do this because I can't see you, but I'm sure if I even asked the 100 of us who are listening to this today, how many of you found faith through just praying and talking to God on your own, it would be a significant percentage. That's certainly how I came to faith. So one of the things that we can put in the personal pathway is that we can say to our friends, by the way, during this time, have you thought of talking to God? Talk to him about your pain and your difficulties. If you'd like to get to know God, then talk to him about that. Ask him, are you there? Do you really love me? How can I get to know you? That was the conversation I had with God in 1974. Are you the people these people say you are? And if you are, I want to surrender my life to you. And right there on a cold street in Melbourne, something rather remarkable happened. So I think we can encourage people to think creatively. But for us as church leaders and mission champions, we want to encourage people to create a pathway that helps their unchurched friends, that helps our internet connections come to faith. It starts with an encounter, friendship, service, internet. Then the challenging bit. How do we help them engage with the content of what faith is? And then thirdly, how we offer them an opportunity to embrace Jesus for themselves. Well, I hope these few thoughts have been helpful. And as we finish that little passage in Colossians, it says that let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt. And so we want to step into these spaces, encouraging people to speak graciously, taking the opportunity of this open door, helping our friends encounter, engage, and embrace. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Laurence. Thank you. That's excellent. You've given us lots to think about. We've got a couple of questions for you, Laurence, in the chat. So, how do we avoid the buildings becoming too dominant again?
Well, I think
out of our, how do we do that?
Well, I think when we go out of lockdown, indeed, there are two things I think we need to do. That for many of us, we will keep an internet presence. I think we have found that people are watching our church services. So we need to recognize they're there, find a way to engage with them, which might be offering them things I've already said. But the second thing is, I think we have to realize that the importance of the layperson, the importance of the ordinary church member, and put a lot more training into that. And that's one of the reasons we created Mission Champions. A mission champion is somebody who empowers their other church members. And we've been working on some other things, personal missional strategies, where we help people to pray, to speak, to give, to invite people into their lives in all sorts of ways, and to make a new friend. That I think we as mission champions and church leaders need to recognize the importance of people power. We've known this historically, but the swerve to rot, the swerve to reliance rot is a strong word, excuse me, but our swerve to reliance on the church buildings, we mustn't go back there. We have to empower people. Thank you, Rachel.
Thank you. And the next question is, should we be doing more in the open air as at the site of George Floyd's memorial? So what can we do in the open air when our buildings are not there? Also, I guess that's for us, we have to keep track of what the regulations are on how many people can meet outside, social distancing. Any thoughts, Laurence?
Well, Rachel, you've been at the forefront of things like Hope Spaces, trying to create an interesting space, initially inside buildings, but you've been thinking of lots of creative ways that you could take that outside now. We heard a testimony earlier of how a shop front, there will be a lot of empty shop fronts. And we need to take those opportunities, but we need to remember that as we take it, to treat people with grace and respect, that in our local communities, these are people who are near to us. So we want to step into the space and just take people on a nice, soft journey, one step at a time, because they're going to be in the town for a few years. We're going to be in the town for a few years. So I think some of the creativity on Hope's website with Hope Spaces and all of that will be very, very helpful at this time.
Yeah, that could work in like in a gazebo. We could take some of that out into a gazebo, and so therefore if you were somewhere where the weather was good and it was a sunny day, you could do a pop-up prayer space somewhere where again you'd engage, where you think there's footfall. It's particularly looking, isn't it, where there's going to be footfall, where people are going to be walking past. Exactly. And again, exactly. Even if it's a pop-up with, a small space to pray, we're going to tell you later. Do you have digital resources? Yes. Yeah, we're just launching 2 sets of digital resources. So I'm going to answer Dorothea's question, if that's okay.
I'll add on at the end.
We were going to add it on the end, but we'll add it on now. We created 2 websites, which one has just launched and the other will be launching next week. So one is called Hope for All and one is called hopespaces.com. So one focuses, like the Hope Spaces, on that concept of experience. So 41% of us said we came to faith because of an experience of God. That's where we think non-Christians can go and try prayer. We've created a virtual prayer wall. So just how the original Hope Space, you had a wall where you sat there with a pen and paper and you wrote down a prayer and you put it on the wall. We can't do that anymore because we can't touch things. But there's a virtual prayer wall. So you write it on a Post-it note and it goes onto the wall in front of you, but online. And it's got other prayer experiences on there for people, just so that they can actually experience God for themselves online. And we've also got, thank you, Catherine, and then we've got hopeforall.org. .uk. That's where people can, if you think about our magazine, we have taken our magazine and we've put our magazine online. So there is chats about celebrities and the Hope in Certain Times booklet that Catherine did an extraordinary job of writing. We've animated that. So again, people can, if you like, they can experience that little booklet if they haven't got it in their hands. So we've been working tirelessly as a Hope team, so that you've got things that you can point people to. So at the end of your services, you can say, why don't you try one of these? If you want to experience prayer and experience God, go to Hope Spaces. If you want to find out more, go to hopeforall.org.uk and they link. So we're very excited. We're literally launching that next week with the virtual prayer wall. So thank you for that question. Laurence, is there anything else to add?
I'll just add on to that. I think we can be very surprised at the creativity that lies in churches. I was in touch with a lady who was wondering what she could do on the internet, and she was very good at origami, making things out of paper. So she started just going up on the internet and giving origami lessons, but everything that she made had a spiritual meaning. And during the making process, as people were copying, she told them about the spiritual significance of the objects they were making. So just through her origami, she has had the most amazing gospel opportunity. So I think there's all sorts of creativity we have yet to find. And some of that could be through the skills of our church members.